Hello, this is Brian Funk, and thank you for listening to the Music Production Podcast. I'm very excited to announce that my new book, The 5-Minute Music Producer, is now available in paperback form, a real book that you can hold and touch and turn to any page you like in a second. And it's a pretty big book, 629 pages of activities, exercises, and wisdom I've learned over the years. It's available on Amazon.com. The 5-Minute Music Producer is 365 music-making activities that will help with your songwriting and music production. It'll help you fight writer's block, make more music, write better lyrics, develop solid workflows, learn techniques for generating ideas, and finish more music. It's like having your very own music production personal trainer giving you ideas and challenges each day. And the best part is the challenges are quick and easy, and they only take a few minutes. So even if you don't have a lot of time, you can spend 5 minutes and advance your music production skills. There's no better time to improve your music than now. Imagine where you'll be after a year of these activities. The 5-Minute Music Producer has hit the #1 new release in the music songwriting and music recording and sound categories on Amazon. So check out the 5-Minute Music Producer, 365 music-making activities. It's available on Amazon.com, or you can go to brianfunk.com/book. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Music Production Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Funk. On today's show, I have Rob Kovacs, and Rob is an amazing musician, songwriter, producer, composer. He's a college professor. He is also known as 88-bit, and this is how I got to know Rob. Last year at the Long Island Retro Gaming Expo, Rob was performing, and I was running the sound. And I was just blown away by what he does. He recreates video game soundtracks on piano, playing parts that were like impossible to play by humans because the computers were sequencing them, but he figured out ways to play like some of those like 64th note bass lines and things like that. But we also got a chance to sit down and hang out a while, and we had a great time, and we've been meaning to get this going. And he's got a new album out. It's called it's the soundtrack for the game Straylight. And it's a really awesome immersive album made mostly with the Prophet 5, which kind of blows my mind. And I got some questions about that too. But Rob, it's great to see you again, man. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, it's been, 5-6 months. It's great to see you again as well. And thank you for that wonderful introduction. That was so kind. And thanks for having me on your show.
It's a pleasure. You're one of the rare cases where you're a person I've met in real life and hung out with before we do the podcast.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Like most of the
You've
people
done a lot of these too. You've done like what, 300?
Yeah, we're 300 and change.
Jeez.
Yeah,
that's a lot.
Crazy.
That's awesome, dude.
It's just like anything, you just do it consistently long enough, and next thing you know, like, holy cow, look at this. It's added up a bit.
Yeah, 300 podcasts.
Yeah, like
Dude,
6 years, I think now. Yeah, because it's been about one a week. Yeah.
Dude, that's awesome. Man, consistency is so tough. So I have a ton of respect for being able to do something that long.
Thanks, man. Well, I know you are no stranger to consistency. I mean, to get to your level as a musician, obviously, is just ages and ages of work and hours of practice a day, I'm sure. It was so much fun watching you play, and I'll just say to anyone listening, you got to check out 88-bit on YouTube and just watch some of these performances. It's wild. But
well, thank you, dude. Thank you very much. I have a blast playing those concerts.
It's really cool that you go through the transcribing part too. It's not like somebody else is doing this and they're like, here's how you play this on the piano.
Yeah, I mean, I started into it because I didn't see anybody doing the music justice on piano. This was like 15 years ago, and there's, YouTube is still pretty early still, and there's just people playing piano versions of, very popular videos of piano versions of video game music, but messing up the melody or barely, it's just like, here, check this out. This is a little bit of the music, but not really an ode to the music. And so that's what I wanted. I felt this music needs a little more love and appreciation. Now, there's since been a lot of other people who've really done that and done great stuff with recording video game music, like Purple Shala comes to mind. her arrangements of like Near are really incredible. So that's where I was coming from, and I specifically wanted to do the NES music because it was like so limited. You only get essentially 3 voices, technically 5, but really 3 with pitches. And those composers had such a unique challenge to just have those many voices, but plus a lot of power with the Nintendo like sound chip, which is a little mini computer that is technically performing the music while you play. They could write stuff that they didn't have to worry about human playability. Right. So there's a big limitation, but also like a huge freedom. And there's music that on those 80s soundtracks, nothing like that prior to it, and really nothing like it since, unless somebody's trying to do something in that style. So I wanted to take that music and give it to a new audience, because if like my parents hear that sound, that 8-bit sound, which is also super unique, but anyone older than us is going to be like, that's toy music. It's for kids. So they're immediately turned off. But when you hear it on a piano or a real instrument, they're more receptive to it. And it also gives it like a different type of life, because you have different dynamics. You have a human playing it, and it's also super virtuosic. So all these things lend to, I think, an exciting performance, and a different love of the music gets shown.
Yeah, I think we're at that funny age where we were kids playing those games, and it's just getting pounded into our subconscious. I know when I first started playing around with synthesizers, I was like, square wave. I was like, yes, this is the coolest sound ever. Because it sounded like...
sounds like Super Mario Brothers. Exactly.
Right. I was like, it got me into synthesis, really, because I wanted to have those sounds in my songs, because I felt the nostalgia when I heard that. And so it pulled me in. But I could see how older people, it's just beeps and boops. Like,
yeah, I remember hearing this song by the Postal Service in like 2001 or 2. I forget the name of the song. I think it's Colony, but it's like... now I forget how it goes.
I recognize it though.
That's it. Yeah, but it has that same... It has that like video game sound. And that was like the first like rock band or rock song that I ever heard where it's like, oh my gosh, this is calling on my nostalgia. This is sounding like a video game. This is so cool.
Yeah.
Now that's more popular now, but that was my first memory of hearing a song do that.
At that time period, it was kind of only just becoming nostalgic, because I think we were like, you get tired of the thing for a while and you don't want to hear it. You want to hear the advancements, but then probably 20 years at that point, it comes around again. You're like, oh yeah. And it makes you remember being a kid, like sitting on the carpet.
There's that thing that I forgot about and set aside because it was, I was a kid and I'm trying to grow up and now be an adult, and you push those things away. And after you do that for a while, when it comes back, then it's like, oh, okay, now you're more receptive to it again.
When I was watching you perform some of these old game soundtracks, I mean, it's exactly what you said. I mean, for one, just like watching what you have to do to even play some of these bass lines, for instance, that were, you almost can't, the piano's almost just not made to be played that fast, because to repeat the note over and over. You had some like pretty interesting techniques with your hand. Yeah.
That's the most challenging thing with the piano. So a lot of other instruments are great at repeating note, like trumpet, like dig, 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 or guitar, violin even. But repeated notes are the piano's Achilles heel, because there's a lot that the piano mechanism has to do to be able to like hit the hammer, and then it resets back, hits the string, and then it doesn't stay there. You hit the string, and then it recoils for a minute, and it holds. And to be able to get it to actually like repeat this over and over again, there's a complex mechanism, and the Steinway piano has it mastered. They do it the best. They have the fastest repeat. Yamahas are a little slower. Every other piano I've ever played is a little bit slower.
Right.
This is a Boston, which is a Steinway designed piano, but it's and it's not made. Like, it's produced by, I believe it's produced by Kovacs, and it has pretty good repeated action. But not, part of this is a combination of me doing it correctly. and the hammer recoiling. But yeah, to try to get it really, really fast, it has you then bump up to the limitations of the piano. And then if I'm playing on a keyboard, which sometimes I am at these conventions, like it's just it's nearly impossible.
Yeah, the
I
different
do my
actions
best with it.
Yeah. But it does really highlight too, just compositionally, what they were able to do with just a few voices and create magical worlds and really interesting musical things were happening and all that stuff.
Yeah, I like to think of it as like Bach on steroids. So, Bach might have a 2-part or 3-part or 4-part, fugue or something. So each line is doing its own thing. And similarly with Nintendo, it's not the NES. So you have 5 sounds. So for anyone who doesn't know, you have 5 channels essentially. One is just noise, so just white noise, all that stuff. So it can't make a pitch. Then there was 2 square waves and 1 triangle wave. The triangle wave doesn't even have volume. It's just a max volume the whole time. Because essentially it's actually just taking a square wave and changing the volume constantly to make it a triangle-ish look. So the triangle wave didn't even have any dynamic variation. The square wave you could change the width, and then the last channel was the sample channel, which wasn't even used half the time, but it could do like very short wave samples, very bit crushed samples. So sometimes you'd hear a voice like the game Double Dribble. It says,
Double Dribble.
Double Dribble, almost indiscernible. But so later on, they started using it for actual music. Super Mario 3 uses it. Like there's like this timbales that kind of sound. Dum 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 boom boom. That's an example of the wave channel. Some started to use it for actual like pitches. So then like games like Fire and Ice had 4 channels. Zombie Nation had 4 channels. But most just use 3. So they packed, tons of notes into those 3 voices. You could do things that you couldn't do with like a human. Like you could have that one voice play the melody and then jump back down and play the bass and then jump back up and play the melody. Mm-hmm. So you get like real thick sounds by doing that. But like a regular instrument doesn't have that register or can't make those leaps that fast. But this computer, they can do that. So that's what makes it really unique. They jammed a ton of notes in there, but they also used the technology to their advantage. David Wise comes to mind for that. Like he has a song, did a soundtrack to a game called RC Pro-Am, and the melody, every voice is doing everything. It's either playing a harmony or a melody, but it's filling up every single 16th note slot. So one voice is going. So jumping back and forth, or so it's super thick and really unique sounding.
Yeah. Sound effects too mixed in.
Yeah, and then when you get the sound effects mixed in, that's a whole different thing because then you had to lose a voice to play the sound effect. Which some games got around that by separating the two. Like there's a game called Rygar, which I really like, but it only uses 2 channels for music, and then the 3rd channel, the triangle wave, is exclusively used. The triangle and the noise channel are used just for the sound effects, so that they'd never compete. But then you get games like Mega Man 4 that introduced the Mega Buster, where you can charge it up. And there is a charge up sound, which I think uses 2 channels. It's like, and you basically just hold that the whole game because you want to have your Mega Buster charged. And so the whole game, you're hearing like half the music. Like the music like really
baseline, basically.
yeah, the music really suffers in that game, unfortunately, because of the sound effects. And the music in Mega Man 4 is really great. I think really underrated. I think probably because of that, because of the competition between the sound effects.
Yeah,
it's a game I'm hoping to eventually transcribe and perform.
Nice. Yeah, I don't know if I told you, I have a MIDI NES, which is a cartridge that you put in your Nintendo and has a MIDI cable that comes out of it. And it has a little, user interface where you can kind of see what's going on, sort of, with the channels, the different pulse waves and the triangle. And there are samples built in, and some of them sound like they might have came from like a Mickey Mouse game, and some of them are drum sounds. Some of them
Oh
more
wow,
like
it's even got
actual.
samples.
Yeah,
That's
it
really
does.
cool.
And I think it's two banks of samples as well. But I don't think there's any way to, you know, change them out, at least not unless you know how to take it apart or something, I'm guessing.
Huh.
But
I've seen that. That does seem really fun to play with.
yeah, there's another one now I think called Chip Maestro, which is probably the way to go because from what I saw on the forums, the person doesn't make them anymore, and I think there were a lot of unfulfilled orders and
Oh
angry
no, yeah.
people in the forums. I got mine so long ago; it was like probably 2007 or so.
Oh wow, yeah.
So I actually got it, and it's so cool. It's really fun, but it does exactly what you're talking about. It just blows your mind at like what they were able to do with so little.
Yeah. And so much of it is like was lost in the audio. Like you're playing these games on a 13-inch TV with a mono speaker and like has no bass response. And the NES can produce some serious bass. Like if you take it now
Yeah,
and you pump it through like your
that
stereo
triangle
system,
wave is
yeah, it's massive.
yeah.
It is massive. So I mean, a lot of people been doing stuff with Game Boys because the Game Boy synthesizer is a little more powerful. It has stereo, for example. It's very similar, but a little more powerful. But the composers were making really dynamic music that just wasn't heard, correctly until decades later, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And even now, though, if you go on YouTube, a lot of people have uploaded, a lot of the music and the NSF files, but it's emulated sound, mostly through Famitracker, which is very bright and doesn't have that warmth that the actual NES sound chip makes. Some people are starting to upload the actual like files from the NES, and there's a lot. It's just richer, it's warmer, not as brittle. So if you get a chance to hear the actual games music in game through the NES, it's worth hearing.
Yeah, there's a power to it. It's a little bit of a buzz in there too, like kind of like a
That
60
triangle
hertz
wave
or whatever.
specifically has like a weird buzz to it. That's because it is just like a tiered triangle wave. It's like a pyramid almost.
Yeah, I think even just like a line noise too that is living in that. That's kind of hard to get rid of, but
Yeah.
I have mine set up and it's just like some computer monitors or studio monitors hooked up to it. But yeah, it's fun to turn it up and play and like game like Contra that's really exciting and to just get that extra level of energy is I wanted to do that at the Expo actually, and we did it with Res. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, I
We
was
had the
playing Res. That was super fun.
That was fun going through the PA, but I'd love to do it too for just some old games.
Dude,
Just-
you should do that. Bring your MIDI NES cartridge and blast some stuff through the NES.
right. Yeah.
I'll be
very
there again this year. I don't think we've officially announced it, but I'll be there
nice.
back at the Long Island Retro Gaming Expo.
Yeah. Good times there.
It was so fun, man. I was so impressed by that event too. Like I've been to a bunch of conventions, and that one, a lot of like retro game convention, and that one was one of the best that I've ever seen. Just so broad in how many things that they had, all the different consoles, the retro stuff, the arcades, the merch, not merch, but the where everybody's selling everything. Can't think of the term for that right now.
Yeah, the vendor area. Yeah.
The vendor area, yeah, very eclectic. The programming they had, the music, the speakers, it was just so well done, so well thought out. And a lot of love was put into that, you could tell.
I'll pass that along because, it's all a labor of love. Everyone that's working there is just doing it because they love it and they're excited about it. And it comes across.
Yeah, it totally shows. So yeah, anybody in the New York area, definitely check out Long Island Retro Gaming Expo.
Yeah, this would be something like maybe the 7th one, I think, coming up. I don't know.
Wow.
COVID kind of got in the way. We missed a year, but We did like an online version.
Yeah,
miss-
I think that I played one of those.
I don't remember.
You did two long. Yeah, you did two online versions, and I think I played at the first one.
Yeah.
I have a shirt. I forget,
Yeah.
but they called it
Uplink.
Uplink. That's what they called it. Yeah.
You know what? At that, I did from my right over here from my little enclave there where the video games are. I talked about the MIDI NES. Did a little presentation on it.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I still have the video. I gotta upload that
I
sometime.
should check that out. Yeah, that sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it's cool stuff, and that was like really fun to hear the way you reinterpreted everything. You know, to put it into
Thank you.
your own way, and it was a great fit for the venue and the event. You know, and people kind of coming by and be like, "Oh man, I know what he's playing."
Yeah, that's the idea. You know, people don't hear live video game music ever, so it's great that they program that, and I'm glad to be able to bring that to people, and especially these older retro games that they recognize, and then other ones that they don't. It's like, the Nintendo had 684 or ish games, all with music, real composed by real people, and you don't get to hear it unless you are really good at the game or own the game or think to look it up online now. So yeah, a lot of this great music is out there that I want to help shed more light on. Games like Arkista's Ring is a rare game that I really like. Or
I think you did some of that. If I'm not
I may
mistaken.
have. Yeah, Rygar is another one. I mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, you did that. I remember because that had that crazy like.
Yeah, well, yes. There's a lot of bass. I mean, they put a lot of notes in the bass lines for all those. You mentioned transcribing. I just want to say a little bit about at least how I transcribe them. So it's not by ear. I mean, I use a little bit by ear, but you'd be so inaccurate because we have overlapping lines, and then the square waves can sound identical sometimes. So I get the NSF file, so the Nintendo sound file, and pipe that through two programs, a FamiTracker with a plugin called NSF Import. So if anybody else wants to do this, and you want to actually just look at the notes, download FamiTracker. It's free. NSF Import is also free. And then the NSFs of any game you want are out there. Most are pretty accurate. There's one game I can't quite get correctly, and I'm trying to think of the name of it. Sometimes the Famicom and the NS version are different. Like Rygar, another example. I keep bringing that game up. Rygar, the NSF or the Nintendo and the Famicom version have different music. Most of it's the same, but there's like 4 or 5 tracks that are different. Why that is, I don't know. There's another game I can't think of, but it's like a tower defense type game. I can't think of the name of it right now, but most of them are accurate. So anyway, you get those, you plug in the NSF into NSF Import through FamiTracker, and then it shows you like every track and like line by line what each code is, and then what the notes are. It just like shows you what the notes are. So there's no guessing. It's like I'm looking at the score that the composer wrote, and then I transcribe it and write it out. For piano music, first I write every channel out, and then I try to arrange it through 2 stabs.
Figure out what finger goes where. And
yeah, a lot of overlapping, a lot of thumbs playing a middle line. Metal Man from Mega Man 2 is an example. There's this middle voice. They were trying to play in between everything else.
That's super cool.
Yeah, it's like a puzzle. It's like, how can I get all these notes in here?
Yeah.
The other issue is a lot of the times the melodies, the voices are in the same register, so in the same octave. Metal Man's an example. The bass is here. The upper voice is also here. And then the main melody is also here. So they're all in the same register, and they sound a little different on the Nintendo because one's a triangle wave, so it has a different tone, and the pulse waves or square waves are changed a little bit. So they all sound different, but they're all in the same register. So you have to spread them out on the piano. Otherwise, they wouldn't come across clearly at all. But then when you spread them out, then you get the issue of like, I can't reach all the notes.
Right.
So it's like a puzzle trying to figure out how to physically play all these things.
Yeah, it fills it out, but stretches it out. So
Yeah.
I got to try that if I can run these files through my MIDI NES just to play around with them. I'm sure I could output the MIDI, right? Just send it once I have the notes.
There are ways to convert it to MIDI, I think, but it's not as easy as you might think for whatever reason. I know there's stuff that can do it, but initially that's what I looked for. And this was, 5-10 years ago, and I couldn't find accurate ways of doing it.
Okay.
But there's probably ways to do it.
I'll have to check that out one rainy day.
Yeah.
So it must be really cool for you moving then to do your own game soundtrack with Straylight.
Yeah.
So how'd that project come about?
It came about 5 years ago. Two guys who had done a couple global game jams met a friend of mine who does art and cinematography, and they met and asked him to be a part of their game jam to do art. He's like, well, let me invite my two other friends, me and Ben Barr, and the three of us, Len, the graphics guy, Len Ganley, and Ben Barr and I have worked on a bunch of 48-hour film projects. We probably did about 10 of these together since 2011, maybe 2012, which is similar. You have 48 hours to make a movie, and they're really fun. They're really intense. You get like a topic and a category and a couple other things that you have to throw in your movie, so you can't like rewrite. You can't pre-write it, and then you got to write the movie, film it, do all that sound and editing and music, and it's really intense, but it's really fun. So we had done a bunch of those, and then this game jam is pretty similar. So Len kind of got us all together, and they recently bought a VR headset, and they wanted to make this VR game and they kind of came upon this idea of like, oh, if I shoot this locked node in space and pull myself, you fling yourself forward. And that was the basis of this game, which we called Straylight. That's basically that. You get to fly around in space like you're Space Spider-Man, and it was really fun. And so I had 2 days to make the music make a song for this game. And there's also some targets in the Global Game Jam, like just different things you can try and hit just for the heck of it. One of them was an 80s theme. For whatever reason, they wanted to go over for an 80s theme. So the graphics were kind of modeled at the time, like more retro wave or Tron-like. And I was like, well, I have this Prophet 5 that I don't really know how to use, but I have it, a quintessential 80s synth. So I'll use that. And so...
It's a good one to have.
It's a good one to have, yeah. I really lucked out. I got it back in 2008, 2009 maybe. I was playing dueling. I started doing dueling pianos, which was a whole other thing. And one of the guys I played with, he used to play in a bunch of bands. He played in the Raspberries at one point too. And he was looking to sell this Prophet 5 that he had, and he apparently tried to sell it at one point earlier, and like couldn't sell it, which seems ridiculous. But
today, yeah.
I know today. So he had some work done on it and was going to sell it again. I was like, hey, well, can I? I'm interested in synthesizers. Can I check it out? He's like, sure. So he let me borrow it, and I just immediately fell in love with it. And I was like, I don't know how to use this, but this is so cool. It's the sounds of songs I've heard in my past. I was like, oh wow, this is how they were made. Or like even like movie soundtracks are like these weird alien sounds. So I was like, yeah, I'll buy it. And he was, selling it for like $1,500 at the time. This is back in 2009. And I was like, that's still a lot for me to spend. I was like, I'll totally buy that. And then so I got a definite steal on that.
Yeah,
and just
that
lucked
was
out.
right before this like boom of synthesizers, analog synthesizers especially.
Yeah.
everything kind of gone digital workstation. And it was, yeah, I kind of remember like I was starting to get into it right around that time. And there weren't new analog synths you could really buy. They would, a couple years later, they just started coming. Now, like every day, it's like a new one comes out. But those old ones are just like, they're like unreachable at this point.
Yeah. And even then it was already like doubled in price. And and I think he asked for like a couple extra $100. I was like, yeah, sure. Here. And yeah, but the sound of it is just so rich, so full. And I've had to put a lot of work into it since. Put a couple $1,000s into it. I had to get a MIDI kit installed, and then just replace a lot of things on it. The capacitors, I think, have been replaced. The power sources have been replaced, and to get it working. And it's it can be noisy at times. I've had to fix probably 30 keys that will break, like the little tine inside will break off. So I've soldered a lot of these back together. But anyway, that's how that started, and just came up with the song in 2 days, which ended up being the Straylight theme, and that set the tone then for the whole game. And it wasn't until like months later they're like, all right, let's. This is a really cool idea, and we all thought it was a cool idea. Like we all thought it was worth pursuing. So the 5 of us then spent the next 5 years working on the game, which none of us thought it would take that long, maybe a year. It wasn't supposed to be as big. I was only supposed to write like a handful of tunes, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger. And now it's a full length game and full soundtrack, almost 45-minute soundtrack, and we're really proud of it.
Yeah, it sounds great. I mean, there's a lot of different moods in there too, and it has this like futuristic vibe, and it's I get how it's a virtual reality soundtrack because it pulls you in, it's hypnotic and it's immersive at times, where it definitely fits that feeling of like you're getting into space and you're there. You're not here anymore.
Thank you. That's the idea. Yeah. Do you have a VR headset? Have you done much?
No,
much VR
I
yourself?
don't. I've done very little, and it's been a couple years already. But I was pretty
Next
blown
time
away.
I see you, I'm bringing my headset.
I would like to check this out because
you play it.
I actually played Rez in VR. Which
okay.
Rez is a crazy game already. And the thing that kind of blew me away the most is after I took the headset off, I was still in my friend's bedroom.
Right.
I was in like a whole universe, and it's funny how fast your body like accepts it and adjusts.
Yeah. I mean,
and then you take it off and like you're just in this little room still, and there your friends is still there. And
yeah, it goes
really
against
crazy.
everything you've learned in your life. When you look around and you turn your head, like, okay, that's the world I'm in, and then you put this headset on, and like the same thing applies, but it's this whole other world.
Yeah,
so
sounds
your brain's just like,
stay in the same physical space, just like when you turn your head. And
yeah,
I'm sure it's improved because this is going on, I'm sure, 5 years by now. And that was Rez is already an old game at that point.
Yeah, technology keeps improving. The Quest 2 is pretty amazing with no wires. The PSVR 2 just came out. I haven't had a chance to try that yet, but from what I've seen, it looks pretty amazing. And you mentioned the immersive of just by listening to the soundtrack. Yeah, the goal was to create something that doesn't sound like anything you've ever heard, so that when you put this headset on, you're seeing something you've never seen before. You're experiencing something you've never experienced before. You feel like you're floating and you feel like you're flying because it's VR, and like different than if you're playing it on a screen. You are in it, and your body is the first person here. You feel like you're moving, and so it's an incredible experience. It's not something you've ever experienced before. So musically, I tried to emulate that, create something that feels very kind of floaty. But also like exciting. I kind of I liken it to like learning how to skateboard or like mountain bike or something, or just learn how to ride a bike. Like the experience of it, of doing those things is what's fun, and the falling and the getting up and trying it again and getting better at it is very similar to the experience of playing Straylight. And so musically, it's a lot of different moods. It's intense. It's fun. It's amped up. And yeah, it's just a lot of music of that I just also like and like wanted to listen to. This is cool.
Right. And is that mostly Prophet 5 we're hearing?
Yeah, like 99%.
Yeah. And you did say you had the MIDI thing installed, because
Yeah,
that's one of the
so
notes I wrote. I was like, Prophet 5 doesn't have MIDI. I'm like, how the hell? Like, and I know you and I know how you play, but I'm still like, how is that possible? So
yeah, no, I didn't play most of that. I think the Rev 3.3 has MIDI. There was a version that did have MIDI.
okay.
And I have the Rev 3.2, which only has 40 sound banks. The 3.3 has 120, so I'm limited to just 40. So I had to record over almost all of the presets. I kept a couple. There was a one track that was used on a Daft Punk Robot Rock and patch 32, so I wanted to keep that.
Yeah. I think you said you used that one, right? I'm looking
Yeah.
here at Devil Star.
Devil Star is that same patch, and that song is. If you've ever heard this Daft Punk song, but it sounds like a guitar. There's a guitar in there, but there's also this like crunchy guitar like synth, and it's synth patch, and it's from that Prophet 5. But yeah, as far as the MIDI goes, after the first song, that was all not MIDI, so that was all played. But if I wanted to do more like sequence stuff, I would have to get a MIDI kit. So I got a MIDI kit installed, and then that allowed me to do so much more. It allowed me to, of course, sequence parts, so I could play it, record the MIDI, and then play it back through the Prophet, and then record the sound. And then, of course, I could layer it. So that allowed me to get like much more massive sounding stuff, because just the Prophet on its own sounds a little harsh and small. But when you layer it and you pan it left and right, and you do it multiple times, then it sounds really immersive, and it's just you're getting phasing happening because it's an analog synth, and that wave that it creates is never the exact same. If you tried to do that with a digital synth, it would be the exact same wave every time, and then panning it wouldn't do anything; it would just make it louder.
Right.
On the analog synth, it's phasing's happening, and then it just sounds like it's all around you.
Yeah.
So that MIDI kit allowed me to do that, and then I just did that the whole time.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, you never get the same thing twice out of that synth.
No,
It's the beauty of it.
It's so weird. It's so wild.
Yeah. I have the Prophet 6 right here, and it has a mode. It was originally called Slop, and that, I think, kind of just detuned the oscillators. But in an update, they made a vintage mode, so you can switch between slop and vintage. And vintage, it will detune it, but it also changes the timing on everything. So like it changes the filter position slightly and randomly. It changes the envelope timing. Everything is like a little bit randomized.
Wow.
So it kind of recreates that, somewhat temperamental analog synth, all the way to like a totally messed up, broken one.
Wow, that's so fascinating. Yeah, the Prophet 5 has a tune button. So when you turn it on and you let it run for a little bit, like 5 minutes, everything starts to fall out of tune. And then you have to hit the tune button, and then it retunes all the oscillators. And you have to do this like for about an hour. Like you have to keep hitting the tune button, because they like warm up.
Yeah.
And then it settles after a while. But yeah, I'm constantly hitting the tune button to tune it, or leave it a little bit out of tune. It also, this one, I think one of the oscillators is messed up, or something's wrong with it, because certain unison patches, especially when the bass, something is getting out of phase. So like it's the volume of like a bass patch is going to be like really, really loud for a moment, and then it starts to get really, really, really quiet. And it does this over about this frequency. So that was a bit annoying. So I just had to like really compress the bass, because I couldn't get a smooth unison tone. But yeah, I wonder if that's also, I don't know, just part of it. I don't think it is. I think that's something is not right.
Yeah, I think they just sort of take on character based on how they age.
That
I've
too.
got
Yeah.
a Moog Realistic next to the Prophet 6. And it's like the Radio Shack Moog, like kind of like consumer Moog from, I guess, the 80s.
Like Realistic, the company?
Yeah, like
They
Radio
like did a,
Shack's company,
oh, right.
Realistic. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, it sounds so cool. I mean, I got this thing because I went to, it was like the Brooklyn Synth Expo years and years back. And I put the headphones on and started playing this. And in like 5 minutes, it felt like an hour went by.
Oh, wow.
I just got lost. I was like, oh my God, I want this thing. And as I got it, I took it home. And then like I start finding out like all the things that are wrong with it, all the little crackles the sliders make and all the weird tuning things. But it's kind of like broken in a cool way at this point where you work with it and you just kind of accept it. It's like almost like playing with another musician and like you kind of maybe you tell them what to play and they sort of do it their way. You
There
just
you go. Yeah.
you collaborate with it a bit.
I like that thinking. That's a good way of thinking about it.
Yeah, I'm sure one day I'll probably have to do something about it, but since I've got it, I've seen it decline a little bit, but it's still fun. It's not to the point where you're like, this damn thing, you'll still use it.
So that's cool.
Yeah. Keeps you like guessing. And it's, like you said, like the digital stuff, I guess the beauty is how precise it is, but sometimes it just feels a little cold or sterile, and just the depth you get from something that has a little bit of variability brings things to life.
Yeah. And tonally, they're different. Digital, I haven't messed around too much with too many digital stuffs now that I have this. But yeah, they're a little colder, brittler, harsher, but there's this nice warmth to the analog stuff that's hard to emulate for whatever reason. I think they're getting better at it. Like the Arturia stuff sounds pretty good.
I kind of think like in a mix, especially, I don't think anyone's going to be able to tell. I can't tell. I can't be like, that's not the real,
No,
but
no. Yeah, but I think there's more of a subconscious response, like the difference between like a really expensive violin versus a starter violin or even a piano. Like no one can. It's hard for someone to be like a regular person to be like, oh yeah, that's obviously different. But I think they just emotionally respond different. Mm-hmm. I had an example of this myself for my last record. I did an indie rock record called Let Go. Had it mixed and did by a guy named Sean O'Keefe. Does great stuff and has worked with a bunch of bands. And but the overall tone, I recorded everything on my own on Logic, and like the overall tones were good, but there was just like it just sounded a little kind of, I don't know. I didn't love the sound of it. Something about it was off-putting. And then I had it mastered to tape, and I loved how it sounded. Like it made the difference was I don't like how this sounds, so now I like how this sounds. But if I had you A/B them, like it would be very difficult to really pinpoint the difference. They sound basically identical. But the response was huge.
I agree. I've got a tape machine next to me that I usually run things through.
Nice.
Yeah, it sounds great. We did, my band did our record, and we brought it to a guy to master to his tape machine. And it was like suddenly just a depth and like a texture like appeared in the music. And even then with the vinyl, it was just like, oh my God, like even more so. It's crazy. But it does something to sort of, I don't know if it's like, there's saturation and stuff, but I also think like just the hiss.
That's a big part of it.
It's like a continuity it gives it. It's like a glue.
It is like,
holds things together.
Yeah, absolutely. We even did two masters, one where he got rid of the hiss, and I thought I would like that. And I was like, no, I prefer the one with the hiss in it. And like you said, it kind of glues all the instruments together. And the bass is smoother all of a sudden too on analog
Well,
through
when
tape.
you record on analog tape, especially if you're like multi-tracking, what happens on track one, like sort of happens on track two a little bit too. Like they influence each other, like if something's too much on one, it almost like side chain compresses it a little bit. There's an interaction between the sounds on the different tracks. But in the computer, everything is just isolated and by itself, and they just play, which you would think is what you want. But there's something kind of magical about that. Just, I don't know, it's like being in the physical world. It takes it to some other level.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to describe, but you could definitely hear it when you listen to those 2000s bands and indie rock bands and pop songs. Like there's a coldness to those recordings versus like stuff prior.
Right. Yeah, it's just crisp and
not in a great way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a bad person to ask about this, I think, because I like my recordings a little messed up and dirty, and I don't really love when things are too clean and pristine. It's just I like the cassette tape demos like bands put out. Those are fun to me.
Yeah, I'm on board. There's a charm to that. There's something maybe human about it. It is a little bit hard to describe, but
yeah,
there's something appealing for sure.
You've congratulations, you've got your album ready to go. You got the funding going for it, and it's going through. Now that's through Bandcamp, right?
Yeah, we ran a vinyl campaign.
I've never seen that on Bandcamp before.
No, that was the first time you saw that. It's a newer thing. They've done it for a handful of years now. I think they started during the pandemic. And I've worked with two other artists who've done it, so that's why I knew about it. Mega Ran did at least one or two records through that. The Forever Famicom Diamond Edition album, which I worked on, and Insane in the Rain Music released his record called self-titled Insane in the Rain, which I played on, and he also did a Bandcamp vinyl campaign through that. So it's basically like a Kickstarter Indiegogo, but it's just for vinyl. You're just trying to reach the minimum cost to press the minimum amount of vinyl, which is $250. And not anybody can sign up. They have to approve you. So you have to have a presence on Bandcamp already, and they have to think you're able to hit the mark. So we tried to go that way. The album's put out through Imperial Records, so with them, contacted Bandcamp, and they approved our campaign. And I was a little nervous because, maybe 10% at best of my following or fans have a vinyl record player. So with a Kickstarter or Indiegogo, you can offer different things. You can offer CDs or different packages, and you can offer other packages, but every package in this case is going to include the vinyl record, which not everybody wants. But thankfully, we had over 120 people pre-order the vinyl, and we got it funded. And then they have a really quick turnaround, like 4 months. So
wow.
We're just now just wrapped that up. We're getting the final assets to them and should have it shipped out in the summer. That's the other nice benefit too. Bandcamp handles all the shipping, so they ship it out to everybody. I don't have to do any of that.
Bandcamp?
They get it pressed.
Wow.
They get it pressed. They probably don't do it themselves, but through whoever they get it pressed through, they get it pressed. Everything's taken care of, and everybody gets their vinyl on time, pretty quick.
Well, that's really nice because, if anyone's ever done a Kickstarter before, you know that. Yeah. I mean, I've supported people, and I'm, mostly just happy to support, but I think there are things I'm still waiting for.
Sure, I know, same.
It's kind of like, whatever, I guess it's not coming. But sometimes I did get something like years later. I was like, what the hell is this? And it took me so long to even figure out like what it was.
Yeah. Sometimes I'm like, I'll support this. I know I might not ever get this, but
Yeah.
I'm going to support them anyway.
But it's nice that they've got it set up so they know, they understand like it's actually going to happen. Because I think probably the problem is when you make something, you don't always foresee all the costs and what's going to happen and the obstacles. And like you said, even just like the turnaround for vinyls, we waited a solid 6 or 7 months for ours, which was faster than it was going to be.
That's not bad. Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know. But it's funny when you finish something and then you just sit on it for that long.
Yeah. My previous record was with Gotta Groove Records. Great pressing place, but it was so backed up during the pandemic. It took a year to get that out.
Right.
And that's how a lot of places are still. They're still at like a year out. It's crazy. Because vinyl is becoming more popular and there aren't that many presses. And there's a lot of reasons too, I guess. But not that I fully understand all the reasons. But yeah, it's just way backed up.
Right. Yeah, well, that's cool that they're doing that like that for you. That's a bit of an honor too, to just be accepted and.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, to say that we were able to press this through Bandcamp, a bit of an honor for sure.
Did you come across any, like in the production of the album, the recording or anything, any interesting challenges or fun techniques to accomplish what you're trying to do? Anything? Usually we all have some war stories after this process.
Yeah, man, there are lots of different ones. Every song, so it was over the span of 5 years, and there's 10 total tracks. And I'm just, like I said, I'd never really used a synthesizer before. And so I'm learning like as I go. That bass thing was a bit of an issue. So sometimes if it wasn't on unison, then it was fine. But it was specifically when it was on unison that I would get the weird volume variations. But another cool limitation with that, specifically with the Prophet 5, is it can only play 5 notes at a time, which was revolutionary at the time. It's like, whoa, synth that's not just mono. This is one of the earliest polyphonic synths. So if I wanted to do like an arpeggio, like something like this, on a piano you hear all the notes, but on a Prophet 5 it would sound like as you get to the 6th note, it cuts off the first note. So sometimes I would use that to my advantage, like it would clear up sounds if I don't want those sounds ringing over. That'd be nice. But if I do want it to ring out, then I had to come up with some other things. So there's a song called "Ascent of the Juggernaut" where I mixed it. I mixed it up. There's this like big this ascending, cascading little arpeggios, and at first they do kind of clear away, but then when the song kind of hits its apex, I wanted to sustain longer. So I would program every other note, something like that, and then I had another channel where I programmed all the in between notes, and then have them, record them separately, and then also pan them left and right. So you get this extra sustain and this like weird panning, and it's so subtle too. Like you really don't even notice it unless you're listening to it on the on headphones and really paying attention. But it's just like a little bit of extra sparkle that happens. So that was one little challenge. So using that same idea, like there's another one. There's this pad on this song called the Straylight theme, where I'm going back and forth between 2 5-note chords, this cluster and this cluster. And when you do that, it's almost like a strobe lighting effect because they're canceling each other out. And so it's rather than just like a fully sustained thing, it ends up kind of like having a little more of a like sharpness to it and weird kind of sparkle to it. So that's kind of neat. That you wouldn't get that on a fully polyphonic synth.
Right. It's fun that cascading, arpeggiating thing, you would have probably just done it normally, but now it's got this cool spatial thing happening as a result of that challenge.
Yeah, exactly. And you bringing it back to some of the 88-bit stuff. So I pretty much started 88-bit at the same time I started working on this project. maybe just like a few months ahead of time before that. I had the 88-bit idea a few years ahead of time, but really kind of started it around the same time. So the whole time I'm like digging into NES music and seeing how composers wrote these early video game music. I'm also working on this soundtrack. And so I took a lot of inspiration from what I gathered from their pieces. And one of the main takeaways was just that it seemed like they're working with new technology and trying anything and trying all kinds of wild things. And that it seemed to me like they felt like they were breaking new ground musically, not just, doing a job. And with VR, I kind of feel the same way. Like VR to me is like the early 8-bit, 16-bit era of video games where you're limited by the technology. And the games are growing with the technology versus the other part of the other side of gaming industry is like pretty maxed out. Like we can pretty much do almost anything we want with games these days. The technology isn't the limitation. And in fact, a lot of people are making games to look more retro. But VR, we're very much limited by the technology itself. So I try to take that same mindset. Like I want to make something that is pushing the boundaries musically and is new and exciting, that has like melodies you can grab onto, but it's also things that you've never really heard before.
Yeah, it comes across, and by putting yourself in like that old retro synth, you will encounter, because you could have pulled up the Arturier. I'm pretty sure they have a Prophet in there, and probably
which is pretty good.
endless polyphony, if you
right,
like.
Yeah. And the other thing too is like I want to make music that I can't necessarily play, or at least that I don't want to worry about playing it. That was the other main thing. So going the other way now. So the 80-bit stuff, I'm taking stuff that wasn't written for humans and trying to play it, and now I'm taking their mindset and I'm writing music that I don't have to worry about playing. So there's some solos in there, like the song Void Compass. There's a super fast synth solo that I programmed that I didn't have to worry about playing it, and but it allowed me to do things that I wouldn't write normally.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about like some of the like theoretical stuff, like as far as like some of the like modes and chord changes that you choose in order to create some different moods.
Oh, heck yeah. Music theory. Let's go.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a specific question, but, like some stuff like you have is very uplifting in the game, in the soundtrack. And then other things are a little more adventurous and kind of feel like roaming type sounds. Like you're traveling through a world or something.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot of theory that goes into this. One of the main concepts was the feeling of floating, so not necessarily having a ground. So in the game, we call it a platformer because you're moving through the level and you're trying to get from A to B. But there's really no ground. Like you start on a platform and then you connect to the first node and then you're floating the rest of the way and you fly through all these things. So musically, I try to create a similar thing. So something that feels groundless is not knowing kind of where you are or not knowing where tonic is or the tonal center. So if I went,
right,
that feels very stable.
Yeah.
And we are solidly grounded. But if I'm playing like this chord, this has a little more weightlessness to it. The bass and the triad are not in root position. We're in the second inversion. And it feels like it wants to go somewhere. And if we just sit on it for a long time, it just never feels quite grounded versus if I did this. So a lot of the game is like this kind of sounds and never getting you to that grounded place. Or sometimes it finally will, but something else might be off. Like this. Like here we're at a B major 7. Root position, or you're at your tonic chord, but something is, it's not totally resolved. I also avoid any instance pretty much of dominant to tonic or 5-1 or this progression. Or you're not going to hear any of that. Nothing that says we're setting you up to land on tonic. So that's all been taken away. I really don't like that sound anyway. So that works out perfectly for me for the soundtrack. So that's partly of how I kind of created a lot of the, as you mentioned, like, I don't forget what word you used, but to me, these weightlessness sounds.
Like, yeah, you're going somewhere.
Yeah, it constantly feels like it's moving. Another, now some songs are clearly have a tonal center. It's not like they're all tonally ambiguous, but one that comes to mind is Void Compass. With this kind of progression here, it kind of just feels like it keeps circling. Never quite, you can't decide where one is or where the tonal center is. It's really an F when we add the melody, but harmonically it never goes to F. So harmonically we're always like searching for that tonal center. Another one too, Ascent of the Juggernaut. That's another one that just kind of like has big chords, and you never know what the next chord is going to be. And it never quite feels settled. And just gives this impression of like, where are we?
Yeah, that was a cool one because I read what you wrote on your website about the album, and you kind of speak a little bit about this. And I thought that was cool how the Ascent of the Juggernaut, it's four chords, but it's always kind of evolving and moving. So it's not repetitive, and it's like you keep like elements of the home or the feeling, but then just alter things around it in a really nice way. It's surprising, but it still feels like it's within this world of the song.
Yeah, thank you. That one is that's my favorite one of all of them. That one was really hard to write, and I just had that concept. I had those first three chords. And I was like, what if I wrote a piece where like the chords never repeat? I've always wanted to kind of do things like that, but it's just so hard because you have to constantly keep coming up with different chord progressions every time versus like, here's my 4 chords. I'm going to loop that and then we're off. But yeah, that one, I did limit myself to certain types of chords. 3, I used only slash chords. So slash chord is when you have a triad or a chord with a different bass note. So like C over F, for example. You have a C chord, but then the bass player is playing an F. You can think of that as an F major 9 with no third, but it has kind of a hollow sound. So I use 3 types: C over F, so with the 5th below the chord, 5th in the bass below the triad, or C over B flat. So now the bass is a whole step below the triad, or C over D, where the bass is a whole step above the triad. So those are the only 3 chords in that whole, 3 types of chords in that whole song, except one. There's a 1 chord where I used a major 7. Other than that, I limited that. So that helps give it unity rather than just doing like, here's random chords all over the place. Right. I limited all these like hollow sounding kind of chords, and then used a lot of voice leading and just where it felt like it wanted to go to make it feel cohesive and not totally random.
That's pretty neat how it's still, there's a limitation. There are rules to it because that's exactly what I was thinking. I read it first before I really listened for it. And I was like, well, that's going to feel like it's wandering around forever, which I figured maybe makes sense with a game because sometimes you are wandering around forever. But it's really interesting how, when you put it that way, like these specific limitations keep us within the world.
Yeah. I think limitations really do breed creativity, as people say. And I love the challenge of just coming up with your own limitations and what can I make with this? Because not having limitations seems just incredibly overwhelming when you can absolutely do anything. It's like, oh, what do I do? But creating some limitations, then it's like, okay, now how can I solve this problem? So similarly with NES music, they had an extreme limitation of just really 3 voices to work with for tone, for pitches, and they were able to come up with some incredible music. Or Bach, Baroque music. So just what can I do with just a harpsichord? How many voices can I cram in for this one person to play? Like, all these limitations can create a lot of opportunities.
It's what we always wanted, though, right? Like, I'm sure, like, you probably felt this way when you were younger, when we had limited technology, limited availability of things. Like, oh, if we only had infinite tracks, if we only had like all these synths and all these machines to make music with, all these pedals, and that now we do, and it's just like sometimes you don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
Whether it's a technical thing or like a knowledge of music theory, there's just kind of endless directions, and it can just be crippling, really, creatively.
Yeah, overwhelming for sure. And now we have all the ability to pretty much do whatever we want. I think my own guiding principles are, make something that you like, that make something that I like, that I want to hear, and I like coming up with my own music theory limitations, like that one. Even the main theme, the Straylight theme, has a chord progression that I stick with, and then there's a rhythm in there that I stick with, and I try to then use that to make the rest of it, even if it's not necessarily a limitation, but just like, here's an idea, and then analyze that idea. What can I do with this idea? So that will kind of create a limitation, but just like, how can I make this idea? How can I get the most out of this idea versus just throwing more ideas on top of it? But I grew up in a lot of prog rock and listened to a lot of like, all that stuff. Yes, loved Yes, and early Pink Floyd and Jethro Tull. And there's a lot of prog rock I love, and there's a lot of stuff that I don't like. And a lot of times it's just idea after idea after idea, and like you have this 40 or 20-minute long song, and that. It's like there's really cool parts, and then there's like, oh, I got to sit through this boring part now, and then back to a really cool part that has nothing to do with what came before it.
Yeah.
So I reject that kind of writing, and I like to rather try and just take in one idea and really make it the most out of that one idea. I think you'll hear that on the Straylight album. Every song is pretty cohesive. It takes one idea and expands on it.
Well, yeah, I can follow it, and like feel it and not be distracted. Like some prog music, you get distracted by what's happening, and for me at least, it kind of pulls me out of it. Because it's just like, oh my God, now we're in this crazy time signature and some kind of weird scale that I don't even know what's happening, and for me, I'm probably a less musically confident person than you would be. Definitely my understanding of theory is like, elementary school version compared to what you're doing here. But I always have this thing where I want to be smart about what I'm playing, right? And half the time it's when I let go of that, I make the stuff I like the best. And sometimes the being smart part is just a couple little things to say, like a major scale, just to change it. What I'm trying to ask you is if you ever get that feeling, like, because you have like, it seems like to me anyway, like you just have this like grasp of it where you could kind of go in any direction and be very intelligent all the time. And sometimes that loses the the mission of the music in a way. But I don't get that from you at all, which is so cool that you're able to do things that are like really interesting musically, but also like listenable and enjoyable.
Yeah, that's the ultimate goal. Like I said, I want to make something that I enjoy how it sounds and that I want to listen to. Also, I remember So I went to school for music. I got a degree in music theory. I never wanted to be a music theorist, but I loved performing piano and I loved composition and I liked theory, but I didn't want to major in necessarily the other two. And so theory was kind of like a catch-all. Like I could learn the most if I make that my focus. My goal for music, for going to school for music, was I just want to learn as much about music as I can so that I can write the best music I can and, be a performer, be a rock star, and give myself just best understanding of music I can. And I remember a professor saying this, and it was like I think maybe orchestration class. It was like, music connects with us emotionally and intellectually. And I think his opinion was like music that hits on both is the most exciting or most successful. And I like that too. I like music that not only do I feel something from it, but that's also like intellectually stimulating also. I can appreciate both if it's just more purely emotional, or if it's even just more purely intellectual. I can appreciate that as well. But definitely it's the combination of the two that really excites me.
Right.
Almost always music, if I'm writing something, it has to start, I'll come up with an idea that, randomly. I think that's how a lot of people come up with stuff. Like they might improvise something and they'll just play something on guitar or piano. And it's like, oh, that's cool. And that's step one, just like having the moment where like, oh, that's cool. What is it? But then that's a total feeling response. That's just like, oh, something hit me. What is it? And then from there, then it's like, I like to use some analysis. Like, what else can I do with it? And then that helps me create things that I would necessarily wouldn't do on my own. But when I hear them, I'm like, okay, that's really cool. There's also plenty of like dead ends. Like there's lots of like, you try something and like, that doesn't hit me. That I don't feel that. So yeah, for me, it's definitely a combination of intellect and ultimately, does it make me feel something? And if not, then I don't go that direction. And if it does, then yeah, it feels right. So like Ascent of the Juggernaut, that one was a lot of trial and error, trying different chord progressions. I had different 4 segments that I would just like swap back and forth, and until it kind of felt right. Until it felt right.
Is that part of what makes it your favorite track? That it was a bit of a puzzle for you? Did it have to kind of conquer that one?
That one and Devil Star were definitely the hardest to write. Yeah, so probably. I mean, I love the way it feels like this. It just sounds massive, and the level that it was written for is just like, and you see it, it's like you're almost like a huge cliff, and it's just there's this huge thing on the distance in front of you. So it just has like this enormous sound. So it creates that feeling, and yeah, I ultimately love where it goes, how it feels, and the work that went into it. Also, probably why it's one of my favorites.
A little extra payoff.
Yeah.
There's something nice when you really sweat over something and it works out. There's a satisfaction to that. Yeah,
because sometimes you put a lot of work into something and you like don't quite hit the mark. That comes with time. Really, it just comes with the more you write and compose. You have an idea like maybe how something can sound. Some composers like, and I'm not like this. Some people like Insane in the Rain is like this. Carlos Eni, he from what I understand, he'll kind of like have it in his head ahead of time. Like it'll like just form, and then it's writing it on paper or recording it. That is not how I ever write anything. It's always like, here's an idea, and I can't see too far beyond it, but let's try different things. And then you start to build it. It's like, okay, I like where this is going. But I never really have a clear idea of what it's going to be, just that I think this can be something really great.
Yeah. I'm not one either that's like imagining the song. It's like, for me, it's almost like archaeologists digging up dinosaur bones. It's like, I think we got something here. Kind of brush things away till we find it.
That's a great analogy. I love that. Yeah.
That's funny. I like that in the sound design too. Actually, it's like a discovery exploration thing, and I've kind of come to accept that as like a way I do my writing. It's like it's either that or it's like I've got a net and I'm just swinging it around and seeing what I catch, and fishing. It's like, to me, it's often a lot less that than like building a wall with bricks and here we go one at a time.
Right.
Sometimes that's a part of it too, I guess, once you catch the thing with your net. But yeah,
Doing
the
your
idea sort
mixing
of
and
has to
EQing.
come.
That's maybe can be more the brickling
Yeah,
part. I mean, there's certainly an art to mixing
yeah.
and mixing an album, but
It gets crafty at that point.
yeah. But I totally agree. Like, yeah, music is like a playground. Like you're in a sandbox. You're able to just try things and create things that didn't exist and experiment. I think, yeah, holding on to that mentality, I think, is really important.
When you're doing these tracks, are you seeing the game first? Are you seeing like the stage you're making the music for, or is it kind of like, how does that work?
Yeah, so it's just five of us who made this whole game. So I'm part of the dev team.
Okay.
I didn't do any coding, but I was a part of a lot of decision making or discussions about like how do we want the game to become. And I certainly I have a Quest One, and I was able to play the game that way. So yeah, almost every song was written for a certain level, at least with the level in mind. So yeah, I got to see all the levels, and I think the only one that was just kind of written for the heck of it was the last campfire. That was just like, this sounds like this will fit the game, and we'll find a spot for it. Actually, the song called Star Forge, I had a different level in mind. I wanted that to be for the last campfire level, which is level 4, which is very like yellow, like a warm glow type level. So it's got this. There's this like warm chord progression. So I had that level in mind, but we ended up putting it on level 2, just because it's the perfect level 2. It's the perfect second song to hear
Earlier
in the
in the
game.
world of the game. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a less like it's a calm sounding track. It's vibey. It's just like, all right, now we're getting into the game. Now we're starting to groove. Whereas everything after that starts to feel more intense.
Yeah, it makes sense. And a lot of times when my songwriting things come together is when I kind of am like imagining what the song is for. Like, is this for like a party? Is this for like a long drive in the middle of the night? Is this the sad drive after the party? Like, am I on the beach for this one? Like, getting that in mind just gives it a purpose, and it's a way of creating a limitation, I guess, too, because if I know it's like bedtime music, it's like, all right, well, no drums, and I don't even have to search through 9,000 kick drum samples at this point.
Yeah, that's a great direction or motivator. Having a scene in mind.
Yeah.
I can totally see how that will influence what you're going to write and how you're going to shape it in every way.
Some of
Yeah,
the
it definitely
people that I
helps.
speak to that do game music or film music kind of say like, I don't know how anyone even does it without that, like I need the scene,
Mm,
and I get that a lot, because like playing in the band is one thing, because we're kind of like in a genre and we know like the kind of thing we're looking to do, fun rock music. But when you're by yourself, you can do everything. And
yeah,
sometimes when you're by yourself, I am at least, I tend to be like a little more pensive. And when I'm with the band, with my friends, I'm wilder. So the music tends to reflect that. But it's like, without it, when I'm working by myself, that's when I just kind of go aimless, and, those unfinished projects that never really make it to anything.
yeah, definitely can relate. Like, where does this song going to go? And I think going back to kind of what I said earlier, just trying to tap into what you feel, what the music's making you feel, and trying to really connect with that. I think that's something difficult to do sometimes, to connect with our emotions and be aware of our emotions. And music really, the cliche is that it expresses the inexpressible, which is super true. And the inexpressible is different for every person. Some people are more free to express their emotions, but if you struggle with I think everyone struggles to some level expressing certain emotions, and music can absolutely help express these feelings that we might not even be fully aware of. So when we can connect with them more and be aware of them, I think I use that as a major guiding principle when writing anything, whether there's a scene or not.
Yeah, there's definitely emotions you can play and hear that we don't quite have words for. They just sometimes just fit the perfect scenario for you. Right? You just
Yeah, absolutely.
in the game. I mean, a lot of the power of the emotion is really driven with the soundtrack. You know, how you feel while you're playing it. You know, if you chose something that was more like carnival music for some of these levels, totally different game.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. Or even just the music off, like it's very just desolate. It's like almost like, why am I even doing this? It's like it's kind of cool, but the music, I think, certainly is essential to the game and helps create the feeling. I took another inspiration from Hip Tanaka, who composed Metroid and Earthbound, and created the Game Boy sound chip. He did a lot of the early video game NES music, like Wrecking Crew and Balloon Fight. But specifically for Metroid, I read in an interview with him that he wanted to do something different. He wanted to already break away from like the cheery, upbeat, catchy video game music that was being written, and he wanted to write something like darker and different. And to him, he wanted to make music that was the sound of the world. Right. So when you're in different parts of Metroid, music will eventually change. But to him, the music was the atmosphere of the world. And I loved that. And so I used that as a guiding principle for Straylight as well, because you're basically in space. There's no bushes. There's no sounds like grass or wind sounds. Yeah. So to me, every level looks different. We have it's got a different monument in it. Everything is a different vibe. And so musically, that I wanted to make something that was different. And to me, the music was connected with the world that you're in.
I think we have a Metroid vinyl that we play at the Expo. Oh no, but I put it on one year. I don't think I played it last year. First of all, talk about a game that makes use of the bass potential of the NES, like boom, and those like really high pitched, like very sparse notes. But I put that on and I was like, oh my God, this is gonna make everyone feel weird, and they're gonna leave.
The right vibe.
They're gonna go. They're gonna be like, I don't like it here. It's too awkward.
Yeah. I love that. I can hear that for sure.
Some things like that game in particular is just like, this is like too intense for everybody tonight.
Yeah, it's not feel good music. It's weird. It's alien sounding.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's awesome. But yeah, it's definitely, one of those records that doesn't really work too well there.
I could see that not being the right vibe.
Well, it's
awesome that you play that stuff. I loved being right by your booth and just hearing you play these different video game, early 8-bit, 16-bit NES soundtracks through huge speakers throughout the whole venue.
It's a fun weekend for like just diving into that for me, because I'm sitting there the whole time. So it's like you get to appreciate the music on a new level, and it's also a lot of fun to see how it affects people. There's a lot of like, people like older people my age with like a kid, and they're like, oh, check this out, And I had the record playing and the dad was like, "What is that?" And he's like, "It's a CD." Nope. But
I was there. I remember that actually.
yeah, it was
Yeah.
pretty funny. But it's really cool to see that and to like appreciate it and take it all in for a little while. I get a kick out of it, and Joel, who's kind of the man behind the curtain, he's always getting new records, so it's always fun when he's like, "Look what we got this year."
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fun event, man. Definitely the music makes it unique. A lot of events I go to don't have anything playing. It's just unless there's someone performing, but a lot of times it's just
It's
silent.
tricky. It's tricky because you don't want to overpower the vendor area. People are talking and trying, and there's also games that have music that they're playing. So it's good that it's sort of like in a spot.
Yeah,
You know,
the way it's done is really good.
I'm glad you're going to be back unofficially.
Me too. Yeah, me too. I'm pumped.
Yeah, it'll be cool. We'll have a good time, and excited to hear you play again. And is Straylight available now?
It is.
The
Yeah,
game?
it came out January 31st. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I gotta get find someone that has a headset and give it a whirl.
Yeah, dude. It's a great game. It's a great experience. We've won a bunch of awards. We've won like 6 different awards at different conventions. We've won Best in Show twice, People's Choice, the music, and we've won Best Music and Sound twice at 2 different events.
No way.
Yeah,
So
it's
cool.
The reviews are really good. We're a really small team, and we've done our best to try to get the word out. And but we're competing with bigger names and games, and so that's the hardest thing around is getting people to like know about it and like give it a chance, because there's so many VR games, honestly, that anybody can make. It's not that hard to make a VR game. So there's a lot of great stuff out there. There's a lot of crap out there too that people spend money on. They're like, this is a waste of money. So I think people are a little reluctant and hesitant to spend money on a no-name game company. So we're doing our best to try to get the word out, because it really is something really fun.
Yeah, it's awesome. I'm very happy for you guys, and I remember you talking about this a bit way back in August, and it's cool to see it come together. And it sounds great. It's fun. It's interesting. It's great on so many levels. Nostalgic sounding, and the music is really nice, and it's fun to think that it's the Prophet 5. So I get a kick out of it listening to it. It's really cool stuff.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate that a lot. Thank you just for listening. I also wanted the soundtrack to be able to stand alone on its own.
Yeah, it definitely does. Yeah, I had it playing at school today, just getting ready for this. And my students are coming in, and they're kind of like looking at me funny, like, what is going on here today?
That's
It's
awesome.
so atmospheric, it sets the vibe, and like kind of like coming in like, all right, cool.
That's great. I love that.
Yeah. Well, we can send people, we've got robkovacsmusic.com, right?
Actually, the best place to send them is to linkpop.com/Rob Kovacs. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's got all my stuff. It's got links to my Straylight record, to the game, to my website, robkovacsmusic.com, and then all my socials, which are both basically at Rob Kovacs Music everywhere, Twitter, Instagram.
Did you say what was the site now?
Linkpop. It's a link tree type place.
Yeah.
But yeah, linkpop.com/Rob Kovacs. There's also a linkpop.com/88bit, since I have 2 personas, which are very much overlapping now.
Yeah.
But there's that one as well.
Nice. We'll put those in the show notes for people. Definitely worth checking out. And anything else before we wrap this one up?
That's mostly it, Straylight. And then I stream on Twitch a lot too, so that's been a big part of my career, especially since the pandemic. 3 days a week on Twitch, which has really been super fun. Mostly taking song requests, a lot of pop rock, originals, video game music. That kind of brings together everything I do. It's we stream right here. So if you like to watch Twitch, follow me there, twitch.tv/Rob Kovacs. Just straight, no Rob Kovacs music, just Rob Kovacs there. And I've got a handful of other conventions I'll be at coming up. VGM Con in Minneapolis. I'll be at GDC in a bit here. I'm not sure when this comes out, but then yeah, that's pretty much it.
Nice.
Thank you so much for inviting me on your show, man. This is super fun to chat with you.
Yeah, it's cool to get to talk again. And like I said, it's so cool to see the thing come together. For me, like when people accomplish something, they finish a record. In your case, it's a game too. I mean, it gives me hope. It inspires me. It's like, yeah, you did it. That means people can do this. Because it's hard. Everything is hard. So
everything is hard, man. Everything takes effort.
Yeah.
If you want to make anything, creating something takes effort. And it's easy to just see the final product and think, oh, that probably was so easy. No, man, everything takes a lot of effort. Yeah. And I fully believe that, if you put work into something, if you put time into something, you will get better. You will get better at it. Everybody can get better at anything. I got better. None of us started where we're at today. We've all got to this point, and we'll continue to progress if we keep believing in ourselves that we can achieve something, and we keep putting in the time. We'll keep getting better.
Well said. Great way to end.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It was great. And thank you to everyone listening. Take care.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Brian.